The content in this video is for educational and harm reduction purposes only. I am not encouraging or promoting the use of any illegal substances. All experiences discussed are personal stories told to share insight, reduce harm, and contribute to public understanding of psychedelics and mental health. Do not attempt to recreate anything described in this video. If you choose to use substances, always prioritize safety, legality, and informed decision making.
Yo, what is up? So in this story, I want to tell the story about the second time I took LSD. So a couple of days ago, I made my first video on the first time I took LSD, and the second time I would say is probably in one of my top 3 favorite times that I ever did it. But I do want to preface the story with saying that large chunks of this story are just straight up missing from my memory, probably because we were like super stoned the entire time as well. So yeah, this story takes place about a week after my very first LSD trip. And for this trip, it was me and my buddy G. Again, I'm just going to use initials in the story rather than using people's names so I don't blast people. So it was just me and my buddy G. This was just a one-on-one trip, just me and my one buddy on this one. Some things to know about my buddy G. So I met this guy when I was in like summer of 7th grade going into 8th grade. And then in 8th grade, we ended up getting some classes together and we ended up becoming like really close friends. This is the guy who got me into weed. So like the very first time I ever smoked weed was with this dude. And yeah, we stayed friends for a long time. I actually still keep in contact with the guy now. But yeah, just some backstory there with who this was. And something else about G is like he's like a really like very stereotypical like stoner hippie kind of dude. Like he's gone through phases of getting dreads or like and like having like really big bushy hair, and like he's like this really tall like lanky guy. Yeah, just some little backstory about who I was tripping with there. So yeah, like I was saying, I don't exactly have a lot of memory of this story, so I don't even remember where or when we got the hits, but I remember we had the hits. My guess is we probably got it from my other buddies C and J, who were like kind of like the main people we were doing all of this stuff with at the time. So yeah, we got the hits. I believe we both got 2 each. And I had already done my first trip a week before that, and G had already done his first trip, I want to say probably like 2 or 3 weeks before that. I think he did his first trip with his brother. I did my first trip with my buddies J and C. So we had both already done it before, we just hadn't done it together yet. So yeah, the trip starts out, we're at my buddy G's house, and we go ahead and take our doses, and pretty much immediately after this, we went to go get some weed. So one of our other buddies was like a big weed dealer at the time, like sold a lot of weed to a lot of people. So we go over to this guy's apartment, and it's probably like a 10-minute drive from where we are, and we already took our doses. I think they're still in our mouth as well, like we just kind of like kept them on our tongue. So we go over to our buddy's apartment to get some weed, and when we get there, we kind of just like hang out, we get the stuff, and we go out on this dude's like back porch. It was like an apartment complex, but there was like, he had a porch connected to his, like his apartment was upstairs, and there was like a porch area connected to his apartment, and we went out there, and we just went out there and like smoked a blunt with the dude, and we were like telling him about how, you know, we had taken acid, and like, you know, he was asking us if we were feeling it and stuff yet, but we weren't really feeling it yet. So yeah, we just kind of like smoked a blunt with the guy out on his back porch, and we didn't stay there very long, like definitely not long enough for the stuff to start kicking in. So we just left, we went back to my buddy G's house. So when we get there, his house is 2 stories, and so like when you go up the stairs, his bedroom is like this way, and then there's this other room that's just kind of like empty, like not, there's like a chair in there and like a computer, and that was kind of like it. We didn't hang out in his bedroom for this. We kind of went to this other room for this. I'm not sure why, but this is just, I guess, where he wanted to hang out at the time. We go in this room, and this room is kind of like painted like baby blue. Like it's a really like baby blue kind of room. So we get in there, and pretty much what we do when we get in there is we just kind of like start diving into like things on the internet. He had this like little old crappy laptop. Keep in mind this story takes place in 2012, so 2012 technology, like little crappy laptops that everybody had back then. So yeah, we don't even sit in any chairs. We just straight up like sit on the carpet on the ground for almost this entire trip, and like there's the door next to us, and we're just like leaned against the wall, and he's like next to me with this laptop, and pretty much what we do the entire time is just like listen to music and stuff. So like once it started kind of like kicking in, you know, we're talking, and we're just like talking about how it's kicking in. We're just like, oh shit's about to get crazy and that kind of thing. And like One of the first things I noticed during this trip was that, like, you know how like walls and stuff have like the paneling and stuff against the floors, and like I remember looking up at the cracks where the wall and the ceiling meets, and they were kind of like almost like rubber banding, like they were just like doing this kind of a thing. Yeah, that was kind of like how it started. So it, like, visuals initially started pretty strong. So yeah, we just kind of like hang out doing that for a while. We're like listening to music, and strangely enough for this trip, I didn't get anxious at all. Like, this is like, so like in my first trip I got like super duper anxious when stuff started kicking in, and this one I didn't get anxious at all. And also keep in mind we're like smoking weed the entire time, so that may have played a part in it. I don't know. I remember pretty early on in the trip, I like had to take a piss. So I get up off the floor and I go into the bathroom, and pretty much right outside the room, there's a bathroom like right next to it. So I go into this bathroom, and the way this bathroom was painted, it was like, it had like white and black stripes, almost like a prison suit, like white and black stripes. And I remember when I'm like in there, I like look at myself in the mirror, you know, the standard rule of don't look at yourself in the mirror. I did that, and then I like pissed, and then like on my way out, I noticed this little ladybug. There was a ladybug on the wall, but like the ladybug's colors were not like standard ladybug colors, like, you know, like the red and black, like the red with the black dots and stuff. It had like taken on the colors of the room, of the white and black stripes. So it was like a ladybug with like, it was like completely white with black dots. So that was kind of weird. This is like the only time I ever saw a ladybug that kind of looked like that. But yeah, took on the colors of the room, which I thought was pretty cool. So I like leave out, and then I tell my buddy G about it, and like he just kind of laughed about it. I think he walked in there and looked at it too and said he saw it as well. So yeah, then after this, we just kind of, you know, we sit back in the spots that we're in. We're just like leaned up against the walls and listening to music. And yeah, pretty much after this, like, shit went completely bonkers as far as the visuals. I remember like sitting there, and I remember like laying flat and leaning my head against the wall and like looking up against the wall. Like the walls are like waving, but it like also felt like I was like a little person, and like I could just walk up the wall. like really changing like your head perspective when you're like in these scenarios can be really weird. Like, I don't know if you've ever hung upside down, or like you sit in chairs in like weird ways where your head is like tilted in kind of weird ways, but like looking at things like that when you're in this kind of like, I don't know, it's a really weird like perspective. Like, yeah, I was like looking up at the wall, and I just felt like this little tiny person that could just like walk up this wall. Like, it didn't look like a wall, it looked like I was still kind of like, you know, looking flat, like I could just walk somewhere. And yeah, I thought that was kind of weird. Yeah, for most of what we're doing while we're just hanging in there, we're just like talking, we're smoking weed, we're listening to like a lot of music. So some of the stuff we listened to, I remember we were diving into a lot of like psychedelic music at the time, because we were like getting into that kind of thing. So I remember we listened to Of Montreal. We were like watching some Of Montreal music videos. I remember we watched some Portugal the Man music videos. And I remember at one point we put on Elton John, the Yellow Brick Road song. I don't know if that's the actual name of it, but that song. And we just looked at the album art the whole time, and we were just like, holy shit. I remember one of the things that we were repeating during this trip was just like, yo, it's crazy how much of this shit is like built for acid. It's like we realized that a lot of art and stuff was like definitely made while people were doing things like on drugs and stuff, and that started to become like really apparent during this trip, especially with like looking at that Elton John art. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I'll put up a little screen of it real quick. But yeah, we're just like looking at this art, and it's just like changing colors, and you're just like seeing all these different patterns and like, you know, like things that you would never notice in art. Yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff was just like standing out. And I remember after that, we put on CCR, which is like, you know, a real old school band. If you've ever listened to them, I'm sure you've heard them. But we put on the song Looking Out My Back Door, and like, this was another one of those songs. We were just like, there's no way they weren't doing acid while making this music, because there's like a point towards the end of the song where everything just slows down and it just gets like really weird. And like, we were watching the music video to it, and this dude is like looking like out his back door, and just there's just like all this wild crazy shit going on in his backyard. And we were just like, there's no way they weren't doing drugs and stuff. And funny enough about that song is like, CCR is like a band that like my dad listens to, so like the whole time I'm kind of like thinking about like my dad while this is going on and stuff. And also anytime this song ever comes on now, like it immediately takes me back to that moment where we're sitting in his room like watching this music video. Like I hear it in a lot of like grocery stores and stuff, like I'll hear the song, and yeah, it always immediately takes me back to that moment. So yeah, that's pretty much what we do like most of the entire time. We don't even really like get up and pace around. We're just kind of like sat back in this spot watching music videos and like listening to music and stuff. But really the coolest part of this trip is kind of like about midways. And so most of this trip was like during the daytime, but it started getting about like sunset, and we went outside and we were just like, yeah, let's go outside and let's kind of enjoy the daylight. So we go out and we stand in this driveway, and so this is like a pretty packed neighborhood, like it's, you know, houses next to houses next to houses, and we're standing out in his driveway, and it's like right at sunset, and we just like go out there. I'm pretty sure he brought his laptop with him too, and we're still just out there like playing music, but we're like kind of focusing in on the clouds. This is like one of those days where the clouds are like really fluffy, and there's like, you know, a good chunk of them, but there's still like blue spots, you know, like a good cloudy day, but not like overcast, just kind of like really nice fluffy clouds. So yeah, we kind of just like watched the clouds for a while, and this was like where the visuals were the most intense for me, because like it's kind of like standard cloud watching when you're sober. You know, you like see things in the clouds. You know, you'll be like, yo, this looks like that. This looks like that. But instead of that, this was like, you know, they were actually forming and shaping into different things while we're watching them. And I remember like one of us would point something out and be like, oh, do you see this in the cloud? And like the other person would be like, not really. And then like 20 seconds later it would form and we would be like, oh shit, now I see it, you know, like that kind of thing. And yeah, we did that for a while, just like straight up, like just watching these clouds like just turn into all these different shapes. And I remember seeing like the ends of them just like trailing off, just like doing this kind of like almost like the end of a jet, where you would see just like puffs coming off, like all the ends of them were just like puffing out and like doing all this crazy shit. And yeah, I remember like while we're out there, we you know, we had taken note of how much music affects like what you see in the trip. And we ended up throwing some metal music on just to see like what would happen with the visuals and like what we saw. And what happened when we threw the metal music on was kind of crazy, because like we were still like looking at the clouds, but like the second the metal came on, like everything just kind of like went chaotic. Like for me, the clouds kind of went like black, and they were kind of like vibrating and shaking in like kind of like this weird kind of like evil way. It didn't make me anxious. Like during my first trip, we put on like metal music and it kind of made me anxious. But like, yeah, this time it was just kind of like a, you know, we're just kind of like, that's interesting. And yeah, it was weird. Like it's crazy how much music actually affects, you know, what happens with your visuals and like how you feel and like what you see and stuff. Yeah, we don't stay out there for super duper long. I think we stay out there for like 30 minutes or so, just kind of like watching the clouds and like talking and stuff. Yeah, and then we just like go back in. We go back up to the room that we were in. We probably smoke some more weed or something. And that's pretty much most of what I remember. We probably just went back and like listened to music. And I remember like towards the end of the trip, when things were like settling down, I remember like looking back around the room and just being like, holy shit, how calm everything is now. And I remember like thinking in that moment, like thinking about what I was seeing earlier in the trip and like how chaotic the room went, because like everything was just like wiggling and like super chaotic. And like I was still getting some visuals in the moment, and I remember thinking like how crazy the visuals were just like a few hours ago, and like how not anxious I was, because like the shit was really like popping off and moving like all over the place. And like in this moment things were still kind of moving, but like not near where they were. And yeah, I don't really remember the exact end of this trip. I don't remember if I stayed there. I probably stayed the night, but I don't really remember. And yeah, that's pretty much how my second trip went. There's like a lot of patchy memory on it. Like I said, we were super duper stoned the entire time too. So, you know, weed and acid combo. And I do remember I was smoking actual weed for this. I know like a week before, for my first trip, I was smoking synthetic weed because I was looking for a job or whatever. But I'm guessing I just kind of said like, fuck it, about looking for a job. I don't really remember. So, we'll call it here for this one. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you're new around here, definitely subscribe. Let me know any of you guys' experiences down in the comments. If you got any kind of like weird like cloud watching stories, because that is like one of my favorite moments I've ever had during a trip. And yeah, just let me know any kind of thoughts you got down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.